Good morning. We start with breaking news. US President Joe Biden will visit Israel in a show of support for the country. It is breaking news as we go to air this morning, and our US correspondent Jonathan Kersley has the details from Washington, D.C. Jonah, this has escalated in the last couple of hours. It was the Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, who made the announcement a short time ago. What do we know?
Yeah, this had possibly been expected. Joe Biden had been considering this request over the course of the last sort of 36 hours or so. Now it is official on Wednesday, so in around about 36 hours' time, he will be making his way to Israel for meetings with Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and visiting a country that is essentially at war. This is a huge statement from an American president who has said he would show Israel unwavering support. That is what he is going to do when he goes into Israel in just a couple of days' time. At a time when there is a huge amount of concern over the humanitarian crisis in Gaza, and also concern from Arab nations around the region about the actions that Israel has already taken inside Gaza, with the loss of some 2,000 Palestinian lives already. As you mentioned, the Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, he made the announcement. He'd been in talks with Benjamin Netanyahu for around about 8 hours today. Extraordinary lengthy talks in which they were talking about humanitarian crisis. They were talking about a humanitarian path. And obviously now, crucially, this visit by the US president. Here's what Antony Blinken had to say.
He's coming here at a critical moment for Israel, for the region, and for the world. And he's coming here to do the following. First, the president will reaffirm the United States' solidarity with Israel and our ironclad commitment to its security. President Biden will again make clear, as he's done unequivocally since Hamas's slaughter of more than 1,400 people, including at least 30 Americans, that Israel has the right and indeed the duty to defend its people from Hamas and other terrorists and to prevent future attacks.
John, I make no mistake, this is astonishing. We know that Antony Blinken and Netanyahu had to shelter in a bunker in the last few hours during air raid sirens. It is not safe. There is agitation across the Middle East. Threats this morning from Israel that potentially they could launch Iran, that they could launch preemptive strikes on Israel. How safe will the president be?
Well, this has obviously been one of the significant factors in the implications and the considerations of all of this. What the Americans are doing are taking the commander-in-chief, the leader of the free world, right now into the heart of a conflict zone. The security ramifications around this are significant, and they would have been playing a huge part in the planning and consideration behind sending the American president in there, particularly at this time. But obviously Joe Biden feels like he has a message that he wants to send to Israel, to the Israeli people, but also to the Arab nations around the Middle East and to the world. You heard Antony Blinken there describe it at the period of moment that this is right now for the world. So Joe Biden is going there with plenty of messages to send. He does not want this conflict to spread beyond Israel and Gaza. That is a very significant concern. You've heard the threats that Iran has been making in recent days, saying that it could target Israel, that it could target American assets in the region. There's concern for the innocent Palestinian lives inside Gaza who cannot get out. Israel has asked them to move from the north to the south. They can't get out of Gaza into Egypt. That humanitarian corridor, that refugee corridor into Egypt is not open for civilians. So Palestinians are stuck inside Gaza, as are right now foreigners too, as they try and work out some way out of this. But this is a huge move from the American president at a critical juncture in the world, a critical juncture in history, where once again the attention of the Western world is focused on conflict in the Middle East. This is a big move by a president. There's a lot riding on it and plenty at stake in the next couple of days.
Jonathan Kersley with that breaking news unfolding as we go to air this morning. Thank you so much. Well, Jono mentioned there is this desperate humanitarian catastrophe that is escalating in Gaza, and it will be the focus of the president. Airstrikes have targeted a vital border crossing with Egypt, where thousands of desperate civilians are attempting to flee. These are some of the incredible pictures. Diplomatic efforts to open that border so far failing before Israel's expected ground invasion, and clearly that's what the president will be trying to help with. And as shelling continues, the human toll is rising. 2,600 dead in Gaza, on top of 1,400 killed by Hamas militants in Israel. This report from our correspondent on the ground, Edward Godfrey.
As of this evening, local time in Israel, the UN says there's been no progress with that border situation between Gaza and Egypt. There were high hopes the Rafah border would open, allowing foreigners and dual citizens to pass through that border into Egypt, but hopes were dashed late this afternoon local time. It's been reported that 5 UN fuel tankers were able to enter Gaza, but even that is now being disputed. There have been long lines of trucks carrying aid that cannot advance. And there are claims tonight, local time, that Israeli forces may have shelled that crossing area. It's understood that there is some damage. No injuries have been reported, but it's becoming increasingly difficult to get very accurate information out of that area in particular. Inside Gaza, there are concerns about the humanitarian situation. The number of hostages Hamas is believed to have taken back into Gaza has increased. It's now being said that it's 199. That's up from 155, which was the number provided previously. A Hamas spokesperson has done a televised interview this evening saying he doesn't know if those hostages are still alive. In the north of Israel, tensions continue to flare up along the Lebanese border. 28 Israeli communities have now been evacuated, with residents there being placed into government-provided homes. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has also made a televised address this evening.
To all their families, we don't stop any effort in order to bring them back, our brothers and sisters, people, men, women, children, babies, all those who were abducted by these satanic people.
It's now been 10 days of war since that initial attack. The number of those killed is 1,400 Israelis and more than 2,700 inside Gaza.
And the number of Australians trapped in Gaza looking for help has more than doubled as the government stops repatriation flights from Israel. Mimi Becker has more from Canberra. Mimi, good morning. What is the latest as we go to air?
Davina, the final 2 flights from Tel Aviv have landed in Dubai overnight. On board 194 people, including more than 90 people from Pacific nations. They're now all part of a larger group of people who are on board an Australian flight back here to Australia. The government says they will no longer be running flights from Tel Aviv, but they will keep resources in the region as a precaution. Right now, attention turns to the 45 Australians stranded in Gaza who have reached out to DFAT for support. The situation there, obviously incredibly dynamic and difficult. The government negotiating with Egypt, the United States and Israel to try and establish a humanitarian corridor.
Clearly, people who are in Gaza right now are in a very, very difficult situation. We are encouraging them to move south within Gaza to heed the call of Israel in that respect.
Now, Israel's ambassador to Australia was welcomed to the Coalition Party Room meeting this morning, where he was met with a standing ovation. He thanked both sides of government before sending this strong message.
We're in a war that we didn't start nor ask for, but we are determined to win.
It comes as the Prime Minister has passed a bipartisan motion to stand with Israel and denounce any hate speech. Davina?
OK, Mimi, thank you. A plane load of passengers are finally on their way to Melbourne after their Jetstar flight was delayed because of an onboard outburst. The plane was preparing to depart Sydney around 9 o'clock when a passenger demanded to change seats. As he was escorted off, another passenger made a comment about the war in the Middle East. Several more then felt uncomfortable and left the plane, meaning the whole aircraft had to be offloaded. A man has died defending his home from fire in Kempsey on the New South Wales mid-north coast. Annalise Bolt is at RFS headquarters for us. Annalise, good morning to you. This is just a devastating development.
Terribly sad, Davina. A 56-year-old man has lost his life in the tiny town of Temagog, which is just northwest of Kempsey. He was caught up in the Willy Willy Road fire, a large blaze which has now burnt through more than 11,000 hectares. Emergency services found his body late last night. They say a burnt-out bulldozer was found nearby. This fire really flared up yesterday afternoon. There were a number of wind changes which were pushing it in different directions, making it incredibly difficult for firefighters on the ground. Locals there were told it was too late to leave, forced to defend their properties in the middle of a firestorm.
Yeah, well, I wish I was more prepared, so being prepared is a big thing. Yeah, and if you're well prepared, well, then it's possible to stay and defend.
You do everything that you can, and with a fire, it's no rhyme or rhythm. It's the winds, it's just, as you can see, like I've been here for about 10 minutes and the wind's changed again, and there's nothing. It's devastating. It's absolutely devastating.
This fire was downgraded early this morning, but it is still very much an active emergency, and firefighters have told me that homes there are still under threat. They're currently taking out damage assessments to get an idea of property damage there, but we do know that at least one home has been lost. In fact, the fire was so big at its peak yesterday, it went into pyrocumulus, which is an effect where the fire actually generates its own thunderstorms.
We had reports of what we know as pyrocumulus convection, and that's where the actual fire generates its own thunderstorm above the actual fire ground itself. The real problem with that, it can give you really erratic winds, so you can start seeing wind strengths in more than 100 kilometres an hour. But the other real dangerous element is that fire then can start generating its own lightning.
This is the biggest of 70 fires around that which are burning across the state right now. Around 40 of those are still uncontained, although we have seen conditions considerably ease today. Firefighters are now trying to take advantage of those better conditions before the fire threat really ramps up again this weekend, Davina.
OK, Annalise, thank you. A man has been charged after allegedly making offensive comments during a pro-Palestinian rally in Sydney's CBD at the weekend. Police arrested the 63-year-old at a home in Mount Druitt in Sydney's west around 8 last night. The man has been granted bail and will face court next month. A tobacconist store has been rammed in Melbourne's north. Police say a car reversed into the front of the store in Preston around 3:30 this morning in an attempted burglary. Those involved failed to gain entry and drove off empty-handed, leaving significant damage behind at the shop. Well, thousands of Victorian dairy factory workers and milk tank drivers are expected to walk off the job this week, demanding better pay. The industrial action is set to begin tomorrow, targeting large dairy companies. The strike would mean no processing at 14 sites across the state, which could see a milk and cheese shortage for shoppers.